just found out that Etsy had rolled out a new refund policy, benefit, feature, whatever you want to call it, that they feel is going to help sellers increase their own sales. And not just by giving the refund and saying, here's your money back, have a great day. They're actually coming up with something they're calling Etsy credit. And Chris, can you pull up exactly what they stated and what this looks like and what does it mean for us sellers?
Absolutely. So, Scott, every month, and for whatever reason, it happens at the end of the month instead of the beginning of the month, which I think is how I would probably do this. They roll out 5 things to know for X month, right? So this thing's 5 things to know for September actually dropped a little earlier than it normally drops for us. And most people ignore this because they only really publish it in the Etsy forum. You don't even see it most of the times, like in the handbook or on their blog. They don't do a great job of promoting it unless you're active in the Etsy forum. And there's a lot of really good nuggets that show up here. But the biggest one that I noticed this month was 2 things. One, if you live in Colorado, it's going to cost you 29 cents more now, but that only affects a small portion of the world. Feel free to give me hate because I don't live in Colorado and that 29-cent order fee doesn't apply to me. Blame your state for that. But the bigger one was they're expanding the ways buyers can get refunds via Etsy credit. And they said, we've been testing out more ways. I'm not sure how many ways there are to test, right? Like store credit is a pretty old concept, but they're saying we've been testing out a few more ways for buyers to get an immediate refund. So the biggest concern that Etsy has in terms of the refund side of things is it takes a few days to process a credit card refund. If they're in a PayPal supported country and paying with PayPal, it can be a little bit more instant. But if you're dealing with the different credit card companies, if you've ever had something refunded, it's like 3 to 5 days before that money is returned, depending on when that refund is issued. Additionally, there's often limits, and it depends on what payment gateway you're using. But a lot of them, if you have an e-commerce store, for instance, you can't do refunds older than 6 months, right? But if somebody just realizes that the thing, they just opened it or they buy a Christmas gift really early and they need to get a refund, can't do that on a credit card if the credit card is expired, if it's over a certain period of time, whatever the different requirements are. So what Etsy said is they want to roll out Etsy credit. The cool thing about this is it means that they keep the buyer on the platform. And that's probably the real reason that Etsy is doing this. They said, hey, I know you had a bad experience with them, but let's keep you on the platform, right? Let's keep you happy. Let's Etsy hold on to the money in the short term, and it ensures that that person is going to come back and buy from Etsy again. And so if somebody is getting a refund from Etsy, if they're able to request it, they can choose the option to get Etsy credit, and Etsy will let the buyer know that they've gotten the refund. They'll let the seller know that the refund is being granted in the form of Etsy credit. It doesn't really change anything for buyers or for sellers other than the fact that it's a new option for them to be able to get it, which means you may start seeing this pop up. The question for you, Scott, and the question for everybody watching this is, given how freely Etsy has given refunds in the past, do you think this will make that process even easier for Etsy? Meaning they'll grant more refunds than they did in the past? Because they seem to just push that button regardless of what the ticket and the situation is. So do you think that there will be a change in the number of refunds issued? Or is this just kind of a wash and it's a way to keep buyers on the platform after they've had a bad or negative experience with an Etsy seller?
I think it's Etsy's attempt of making it look like they are doing this so they can help the seller and help the buyer. But I think ultimately it comes down to they don't want to give the money back and hopefully they're going to spend it on the platform. That's what I think. If I'm being completely honest here and transparent, that's the main reason Etsy came up with this idea and this concept. Now, are they wrong in saying that it's going to help us sellers? It might help us, but we might not get the money, right? Now, it doesn't say it can only be spent in our store. It's basically an Etsy credit, which is fine. It's like you went to Home Depot, you brought back a garden hose that you weren't using or you couldn't use, and then you get store credit, right? The difference there is like you got store credit for Lowe's or Home Depot. You didn't get it to where you can go into the mall. Right. So that's the difference, is like you got one for a specific, or if you got it where it was a specific one just for the shop, I would think that would benefit us more, not necessarily just giving them an Etsy credit. And Chris, there is no discussion there about giving a credit for the seller that they can use it. It's amongst all. So it's like the shopping mall credit, right? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, I mean it's like going to Bass Pro, right? They're not giving the brand credit back. They're just giving you store credit. And in this case, the store is Etsy. At least that appears to be the way that it reads.
Okay.
And Scott, the cynical among us might say that yes, the real reason they are doing this is to save a buttload of money and keep it on the platform. Why would that be the case? Well, when you run a credit card transaction as an e-commerce company, whoever is running that transaction for you, the payment gateway, takes a small percentage. It's usually, and again, depending on how much you sell, this will change, but like 2 to 3% plus a fixed fee. So 2% plus 30 cents or 2.9 plus 30 cents, something like that. And that goes to the Visa card or the MasterCard, right? To use their payment network. And then whoever processes the payment takes that like 2 to 3% haircut. Well, in a lot of cases, those payment gateways, Scott, don't give you those fees back when you refund somebody for a transaction. So, and I'd have to look to see exactly who they're using, but a lot of people just white label Stripe or they white label authorize.net, neither of which refunds you those fees either at all or in full, depending on what your contract is. And so let's just say they did $1 million in refunds last year, which is probably a fairly conservative number given the huge size of Etsy as a marketplace. That would mean that they're paying 2% of that or losing 2% of that or more, depending on what their agreement is, right? So let's just do $1 million. We're going to do some math on the fly here, times 0.02, right? So that'd be $20,000 that Etsy gets to hang on to in the meantime. And if it never gets redeemed, then they hang on to it forever. If it does get redeemed, well, then there's not an additional transaction fee on it, and Etsy made some interest on it. The good side of this, the non-cynical side of this, is that it means people are more likely to stay and repeat purchase on the platform, even if they've had a negative experience in the past. And I think from a seller perspective, that's the thing I'd be looking out for here. I don't think Etsy's customer service team will get more antsy about pushing the button. I just think what will happen is even if somebody has one negative experience, because they do have that Etsy credit, they are more likely to come back and use it. So if they choose that as the option, they're going to come back and use it. And that then means it's our job as the new seller that they're buying from to give them that positive experience to turn them into a repeat customer. So hopefully what that will mean, especially as we get into Q4 here, is that buyers will be more confident in their purchases on the platform overall. They know that they're going to get their money back right away. And even if they don't, they can do essentially an even exchange like you would do back in the day, right? I got the wrong size sweater. Let me take it back into Sears or let me take it back into Kohl's and get the right size. This isn't the thing that worked out for me. Etsy gives the buyer the credit. They can then buy from another seller and have a more positive experience with the platform. I think it's a win-win in the long run.
Yeah, just a quick question that came in. Where does the refund money come from exactly? Etsy or the seller if the money is being used for Etsy credit? I'm not sure I understood. So yeah, it's going to come from you. So you're going to get your money. You're going to give your, the money out of your account back. And then it's not going to go necessarily if they choose the credit option, it's going to go back in kind of like a fund, right? The Etsy refund fund. And then they'd be able to use it. It's the same way that a refund, just like it said in that documentation, everything else for you is going to be the same. Nothing's going to change. So yes, they are taking the money back from you and you're giving them the refund. It's just hopefully they like your shop, they like your stuff, and they'll take that store credit and or that Etsy credit and use it on your store.
Yeah. And that's actually what Etsy themselves said in that little snippet. They said, look, nothing changes for sellers. So if you get a refund, it still comes out the same way. You don't have to do anything. It will show in your Etsy backend as refunded to Etsy credit in case the customer asks you after the fact. But the real reason behind this is it gives buyers reasons to come back again and again. And if a buyer has a question or an issue, right? So let's say my debit card, Scott, expires on November 1st. And I make some Christmas purchases right now, they can't refund that to the card. And Etsy would then have to like send a check to that person, right? If that card is expired or I change banks. So they're avoiding a lot of customer service headaches on their end, keeping the money on the platform, which gives them a nice little chunk of money to sit on and make interest on, right? And that's kind of the running joke about gift cards. It's like the reason stores offer gift cards is because no one ever redeems them to that specific store. But as they're earning that interest, it also means that buyers have a reason to come back to the platform, even if they had a negative experience once, which I think is a win-win for the people doing it right.